Well, hello everybody, it's me, Larry Ortega, bringing you another version of Tech Talks. Today, our special guest is Stan Santos with the Communication Workers of America, known as CWA, and one of the main drivers of closing the digital divide out in the Central Valley, who's going to be sharing some very material key facts, key information on how we can close the digital divide once and for all.
In 2012, he passed an executive order accelerating broadband infrastructure. In 2014, he made an executive order telling the Federal Communications Commission to reclassify broadband as a utility. He sought to accelerate deployment of broadband. He put a lot of money into it and built some networks, and it was using ARRA monies at that time, the American Recovery Act, and that funded networks here in California. In 2017, the Trump administration undid it. They put Ajit Pai as the head of the Federal Communications Commission. He was an attorney and a former lobbyist for Verizon. Yeah, it was horrible.
So it's no longer a utility considered?
No, it would take an act of Congress to really make that happen in a durable way. But the one thing that is positive that's happened is that the FCC decided that they're not going to play any cards in this. They're going to be kind of hands-off, which means the states can declare it a utility. We have proceedings going on right now with the California Public Utilities Commission that we're a part of, and that I've been submitting. He's seen some of the writings that I've submitted personally calling for this utility declaration. But those proceedings take years. We're barely winding up a proceeding on redlining and the way they've been discriminating against customers and communities, rural and urban. So right now, that was the foundation for launching a new proceeding, which hasn't started yet, but the call is out for the PUC to start a proceeding on a utility declaration. Do you know how your cell phone gets to his cell phone? And they'll go, well, yeah, it goes through the air, right? And
it pings from a tower.
Yeah, it pings from a tower. Where does it go from the tower?
To his phone.
Okay, so then I should have brought a picture of it, but what you'll see is that at every tower there's a cabinet. And that cabinet, the cell signal goes from the cell tower to a cable to a cabinet, and then that cabinet is hooked to a network of cables underground. It's a physical connection between there and the central office, and you have channels, and you have a database. And so your phone has your name and your address in its database, and then it follows you. Like you said, ping. It kind of pings your phone wherever you go, so it knows, oh, Sally's over here in LA, or she's over here by Huntington Park. And then Larry wants to call, and so then they already have Larry's file in the database, so they know where Larry's at before he even uses his phone. So then Larry wants to call you, so then it goes to the tower over there. The tower picks it up, shoots it through optical fiber, through a cabinet or through a underground vault or through a hut, and then it shoots it based on where the database is telling it to go, and then it shoots it over to the nearest tower in Huntington. And then it goes up that tower to the wireless antennas, and it seeks you out and shoots you the call. But it happens so fast. Like, how could that happen that fast, right? Mm-hmm. It's almost instantaneous, and that's the amazing thing about it. But anyway, so that's one of the things that I'm trying to tell people, is that even the cell system relies on cables. And those are physically, those are physical attachments.
Smarter, because we're going to be going through the process of building out more and more housing in Pomona.
Yeah.
And it's going to be so smarter housing, smarter.
Yeah. Okay. So my resolution is meant to address that. One of the things that I asked for is that all new subdivisions, all new construction should automatically be prepped to receive fiber, and there should be a push for overlays of fiber in the older neighborhoods, and that it should have a minimum speed. It shouldn't be like the old DSL where it should be a minimum of, say, 100 megs. It should be actually better, but the federal standard right now is 100 megs. So we're trying to build on that and build up. In the future, that should get better. But what you're talking about is what we've been talking about, which is get your city councils to pass resolutions. It doesn't have to be mine, but some type of resolution with serious principles And then that would fold into the whereas the state and federal are proposed to receive funds, or to provide funds. We want those funds. And then you would be calling for, you know, the minimum standards and how it would be built. And then you would eventually end up with a map. And what I did in Fresno County was I took the governor, because the governor already funded, he put 3.5 billion into a map of California, and I'll pull up that map in a second. When you look at that map, it goes through and hits a lot of communities, but it's usually along main arteries, like the one here is running down San Bernardino Freeway.
Yeah, the 10 freeway.
Yeah, so it's there, but that's called backbone, but that's not the attachment to the side of the house. That's just
Yeah.
backbone where you have to establish nodes, you have to put the splicing equipment, you have to put big, expensive head-end equipment like these relay racks that have fiber coming in and then fiber splitting off into the different distribution areas. But it's at least a good backbone to start with, but then you have to also get the funding from the California Advanced Services Fund and through other means to try to put together the last mile. So what the governor's basically providing is the first mile through his middle mile network. What you guys need is the last mile. But after the governor's funding is kind of already circulating, Biden's infrastructure bill, the one that already passed, not the Build Back Better one, those funds have already been approved. He's got another pot of money that's going to be distributed amongst the states. And I kind of calculated with the size of California and our budget and our needs, we should get another 6 or 7, some people say maybe up to 10 billion. So we could do the same thing that the governor did with his money. We can put it all into infrastructure and into the last mile, into the middle mile and last mile.
Like, I wanna.
So this is the California broadband map. And when me and Larry have been going over this map like crazy. So if you look at the map, you can see where LA is. And then you guys are over here in Pomona somewhere. But I always lose you when I try to blow it up. So this gives you an idea. There's Riverside, Fontana. So it gives you an idea of how they think that they have granular information, but a lot of it's inaccurate because when you click on a lot of these areas, and I won't do it because it just takes too long.
Yeah.
But you're talking about this. This is something I designed early probably in November, December, because we saw the federal monies, Governor Newsom had a surplus, a huge surplus in his budget because of the tax drive from the IT corporations in Silicon Valley, etc. And he also had a large amount of ARP monies that came from the federal government. So he put them together and he decided to dedicate 6 or 6.5 billion to broadband, just to broadband. It ended up being 6 billion by the time it was done. And he put it in a pipeline, but as you can see, there's a lot of players here. You got the San Joaquin Valley Broadband Consortium, there's a broadband consortium here in the LA area. You got the boards of supervisors and city councils, you got school districts, community-based organizations. My group that I represent also in the Valley, which is a grassroots group, Central Valley Leadership. We've got a testing and mapping component that CWA is providing as kind of a tech support. You've got legislative and regulatory in the form of the PUC. You've got consumer advocates like your Central California Legal Services and CRLA and them. Whatever legal service that you have in town, they could actually play a role. But they have a lot of difficulties that I discuss with Larry continuously, is even the best legal minds can't get their minds wrapped around on how to file litigation against the telecommunications.
All right.
You've got the California Emerging Technologies Fund, which also has a lot to do with the funding. You've got the utility, I'm on the board of the Utility Reform Network. They're like a consumer advocate group. There's testimony, data, evidence. You've got the internet providers, the incumbent and competitive local exchanges, the AT&Ts and Verizons, T-Mobile, etc. So you got all, those are just the players, and then you've got these kind of during 2021 and into 21, which we're now in. They've got rulemaking at the PUC, and you've got all of this activity going on, which will culminate somewhere in around January 1, 2022. That's when the governor's middle mile map will be finished, and then all the target areas for his investment will be outlined at that time. But to me, they're kind of looking at it as if these are our schools and these are our students and this is our community and we're going to do it the way we want to do it. So they're investing in, a lot of them are investing in wireless. A lot of them are starting to build their own towers and their own systems and networks. Maybe that'll work, maybe not. A lot of them try and then they end up going back to AT&T and say, will you please give us a... Started with AT&T in '99.
Union.
But there's a lot to be said for that. That's why I always have to try to show both sides. And one side is that AT&T is one of the biggest unionized employers in the United States. So at one time we had upwards of over 500,000 workers represented by CAA that worked for a combination of AT&T, Verizon, Frontier, before Frontier I should say. But you've got them, and then you've got non-union and anti-union employers. I would suspect Spectrum would probably not be happy about an organizing drive because they would not want a union in their house. Comcast is notoriously anti-union.
Spectrum's not, their workers are not union?
That's what I mean. We don't represent that I know of any Spectrum employees.
No cable, huh? Interesting.
Comcast or Xfinity, it's kind of like, we consider them the Walmart and Home Depot of the telecommunications.
Which ones?
Comcast for sure.
Comcast.
They're the worst because at one time, we have one unit I think in California that's still represented by Comcast, but my local, which is in Fresno, represented a couple of hundred Comcast workers at one time. We got decertified by a really knockdown, drag-out, ruthless anti-union campaign. And then they would call us up every couple of years and beg us to come back. I'd go back and I'd do the card circulation for sign-up. In order to qualify, I know this is off the subject, but let me try to summarize it.
What company got decertified?
Comcast,
Comcast.
across
okay.
the United States.
Okay.
We had dozens of units where we represented Comcast workers, and they would have a very systematic anti-union campaign, and they would decertify you. They decertify you by getting enough signatures for a new election, which usually has to coincide with the end of your contract. Let's say you have a 4-year contract. Somewhere in about 3.5 years, they'll start a decert campaign, and they'll try to either bring another union in or vote for no union. Sometimes they can do it in the middle. It's just harder for them to do a decert campaign in the middle of contracts. But in our case, anyway, in terms of CAA, we lost dozens of contracts in the last 15 years, 20 years where we represented Comcast workers. But then they would periodically call us and say, you know, things are bad again and, you know, the conditions are worse and I'm not making the money that I should be making. We go back in and we get the rule for the NLRA to honor an election or to certify an election is 35% card sign up. So we would always have a rule of 65 to 70% before we'd even call for an election because we already know what's going to happen. Even at 65%, which is the election that I ran, as soon as we filed the paperwork, the election would be put out 60 days or so. Then little by little, guys would get fired, the leaders would get fired, no consequences. We'd file National Labor Relations Unfair Labor Practices. That would take beyond the election to, you know. So then, and then the other guys, they'd buy them off. Like, they have a thing where they would give them raises, not on a regular basis, but based on merit. And it would be once a year. So then they'd tell the guys, oh yeah, by the way, that raise that we didn't give you last year, we're gonna give it to you now. You know, and like I'm saying, they'll terminate people, terminate 5 guys the last election that I tried at Comcast. So the anti-union environment in telecommunications is really bad. And some of the smaller companies are just as bad or worse. But Comcast is by far the most notorious. But it's the same thing with computer lines. They recognize with the onslaught with the kids staying home how important it is for the kids to continue getting educated. And the kids would try, and they'd use these, and I didn't bring any. I should have thought to bring the Wi-Fi hotspots.
Oh, the Wi-Fi devices?
Yeah.
Well,
God.
they're useless.
They're junk, yeah.
Useless.
Those are based on antiquated antennas.
And they give a family with multiple kids one hotspot.
Yeah, one hotspot. You can't do it. Yeah.
So I would go to homes of these families, and I would get their Wi-Fi hotspot, and I'd use the CalSpeed app, and I would test them. you go into the device and you're looking through it at the network, and then you're testing. And some of them, like you could see the cell tower, you know, it was right there. One of them was 2 blocks from the school. And these are little towns in Raisin City. 2 blocks from the school, I'm testing it, and the signal was not strong enough to register with the servers that test their network speeds. I'll tell one story. I was saved by a piñata. I was, right? Because if you got a backyard and you got a pole in your backyard, where are you going to tie your piñata? You're going to get a wire and you're going to go around the pole like this, and then you're going to tie your piñata to the pole.
Right.
And I was gaffing, and I hadn't sharpened my gaffs, and one of them was dull, and I was on one of those poles that has